Hey you guys, welcome back to the Splat Moto YouTube channel. Today I have a couple simple things that I want to show you guys on a simple hillside that you can do that are really practical for developing our clutch finger while being in sort of a back body position. This is a subject that I've been hammering quite a bit lately, and some people might be getting annoyed of it, but I notice a lot of the videos that I see of people, body is still too far forward and it doesn't really have to be. Knowing when to bring the body forward. Don't bring the body forward until we have to. That's kind of our subject today. Of course, there are plenty of times when we're going to have to bring our body really far forward and keep our body really far back in hard enduro. Majority of the time though, we're not using the strict unstuck technique of starting really far back, bringing our bodies all the way forward before we let the clutch out. A lot of times we're gonna actually keep our weight back a little bit longer. So one thing you can do on a hillside is just literally keep your weight back statically. Don't try to worry about having this big moment of power or moment of body movements combined with power. Let's just work on low RPMs and keeping the weight back and seeing what we can get away with without spinning our rear tire up a small incline. So it'll be a little bit something like this. Not the steepest hill, but it's kind of sandy. It's actually a little bit sandy, the surface that I'm on. So I'm just gonna see what I can get away with here without spinning the rear tire. I don't know, what do you think, Ben? Was any rear wheel spin? Doesn't really look like it. I can see all my knobs, but literally just keeping the weight back. I may try to get on the balls of my feet sometimes to get my weight further back, but if it's a situation where my front end's gonna go high at the top, I need to have that, it's just a small movement with the foot, but I need to have that instinct to jump to the rear brake. That's why we practice a lot of cone drills using the front and rear brake. We use the lock bar figure 8, sometimes with a back body position. There's lots of reasons why we practice that simple stuff to dial our clutch in before we're on a hillside so that we have less chance of coming out here and flipping over backwards. So not a whole lot of movement with the clutch. I'm letting the clutch out. Throttle is just kind of staying on, just slight modulation, but I'm just trying to look for that low RPM. And then as I get towards the top, because I'm losing a little bit of momentum, I'm starting to slip the clutch just a little bit. Because as I lose momentum and on that sand, the tire is gonna wanna spin. We're just kind of keeping as much weight over the rear tire as possible and then controlling that wheel spin. But just literally putting all my weight into that peg. My other foot's gonna just barely be touching the ground as I take off. And it seems simple, it seems almost stupidly simple, right? But this is something that a lot of people have a tough time with. A lot of people come out here and practice and they wanna do this thing.
Now, of course, there are many situations where we do have to get really far forward, but the majority of people, just especially getting into hard enduro, don't necessarily have the clutch and throttle work dialed enough to put themselves in that sketchy of situations where they're required to get that far forward and launch the bike in such an extreme way. But by practicing on a hillside like this, doing basic clutch drills, that's going to eventually lead to those bigger moves and having more clutch feel overall, and then you're going to be better off on the bigger obstacles and the more fancy, more technical trials type moves that we do on dirt bikes.
When I start telling people to get your body weight back, it's still way too far forward. We can get pretty extreme with this. Make sure you get good film of yourself doing this, and in this case right here, I can actually see all the knobs going up, the imprint of the knobs going up here in the dirt, which is telling me that I'm not spinning at all. And I know this drill seems simple, but this body position, maintaining the clutch, learning how to feel that rear wheel and exactly what that rear wheel is doing with the clutch, it's a big component of a lot of the bigger obstacles that we're going to do. So if you want to do things like double blips, big logs and things like that, this is a good use of your time right here. And using this body position with this kind of clutch and throttle work is going to translate more to the majority of your riding that you do on trails than that big double blip that you may or may not need on most trail rides, most technical trail rides. It's not like you're not going to need that stuff eventually if you want to do the really big, more fancy stuff. But for the majority of people, especially just getting into hard enduro, learning how to keep the weight back, learning how to really control the rear wheel with the clutch and low RPMs. So again, those cone drills, the lock bar figure eight, a lot of the stuff we do on flat ground at slow speeds really teaches us to control and get used to the controls of the motorcycle. A lot of guys will get whiskey throttle real quick trying obstacles that are a little bit above where their skill level is. So if we can learn all this basic stuff first, just this simple keeping the weight back, slipping the clutch, it's going to massively translate to even just our regular trail riding, and especially as you're getting into the more technical trails. All right, now another thing we could do with this same little portion of hill here is we've already proven that we can just ride up it with our weight almost in one static position off the back. But now let's start working on applying a little bit of pressure into the pegs as we're releasing power through the transition here. So I'm going to put my bike, halfway up this little tiny incline, and then I'm going to actually establish some extra pressure into the peg as we're releasing the clutch and delivering a little bit of power. That's going to help initiate a little bit more momentum earlier on through the earlier part before it gets really steep. It's almost like we're sending the bike up the hill with a little bit more power so that we can use less at the top and hopefully control our wheel spin once we get to the top. And then we'll take it a step further and start trying to carry our front wheel on a real basic level. So get about to this point right here, and again, I'm not going to do the big back and forward. It's not going to be a huge moment, but I'm just going to try and get up on the peg, establish a little bit more weight into the pegs as I go through the transition here, as my rear tire starts to go through the transition. And I even started carrying the front wheel on that one, and I didn't really even mean to. But that's a goal we can have, is to start kind of carrying the front wheel a little bit higher. That's going to allow us to keep a little bit more weight on the rear tire for longer and utilize a little bit more body English as well. We'll start up here a little bit higher. Now I'm really in some silty sand here, so it's really easy to spin. Not bad, not bad. It is super slippery. I got a little off there. Something to think about too when you're doing this is if you're just using one peg, you need to realize that as you're getting up, that peg pressure wants to go this way, so you need to consciously kind of keep the bike upright and kind of compensate with a leaning back the other direction just a little bit more, because when we hit the peg, it wants to bring the bike over. That could send us off in a certain direction that we may not want to go, so we need to compensate and experiment on a little hill like this with heading off that direction or going this direction. So maybe this time, when I get to the top, I'll, in my mind, be thinking, I'm gonna go that direction once I get to the top. And I still messed it up. That's okay though. Now I'm gonna add just a little bit more lean to that other side. I didn't compensate quite enough. And that's okay, it was definitely closer. It was more straight than the previous time, but now we're gonna try and really make sure that we head in this direction. That wasn't too bad. Maybe a little tiny bit of wheel spin, but we're getting pretty siltified on this little hill here. It's just pretty ridiculous. But you guys get the point. And if you have a hill that has a little bit more traction on it, it'll be a little more consistent, easier to practice on. But whatever surface you have, go practice on it, get used to it, see what that surface gives you in terms of power and using the clutch, power delivery with the clutch, all that stuff. Now, if that drill's starting to become ridiculously easy, take that same exact piece of hill that you were on before, and now let's try to carry the front wheel. Now, this is going to require even more clutch work, especially if we're going to keep our weight back. Because if we start getting whiskey throttle, our clutch isn't really dialed, it could loop it out real easy. So again, you got to hammer the basics before doing stuff that's could cause you to flip over backwards. I recommend doing the cone drills, the figure eights, a lot of basic clutch hillside drills. You can hear how low my bike gets. That's another really important thing, is making sure that your throttle and the clutch is adjusted as perfectly as it can be. So a lot of times I coach people and the throttle has a ton of play in it, or it's hard to turn, the cables might need to be lubed on your bike. It makes life a lot easier when you can twist the throttle a little bit easier, and then the clutch as well, making sure that your clutch is working as perfect as possible. Sometimes I get on people's bikes and it wants to stall on me a lot easier than my bike does. Make sure you have your new clutch dampers. If your motor is getting worn out, there's little things to consider there. Clutch washer position on the inside changes the engagement point, changes your window of engagement. That's a separate video, but it's something to look into. I know there's other videos that guys are talking about it. But again, we're just trying to learn to exist in this really low RPM zone on the dirt bike. So as I get towards the top, really trying not to spin, and I'm trying to carry my front wheel higher and higher and see what I can get away with. This one I really recommend filming because a lot of times people will think their front end's going high and it's just barely coming off the ground, when realistically you can get pretty high at a certain point once you get more comfortable with the throttle and clutch. Little tiny bit of rear brake there. I almost didn't need it. I could have just used the clutch. But again, this is just a small drill like this, a small obstacle like this. You can start working on things like that. You can start sending the bike up. In fact, if you want to make it even easier, just roll into it without stopping in the middle and just try to ride up real slow and carry the front wheel high. I'm basically going to be slipping the clutch the whole time because we're going to be going so slow that we got to be using the clutch the whole time. The clutch is not all the way in or all the way out. It's a continuous modulation with that finger. That, again, that might look kind of fancy, so take it, if that's a little too hard, bring it down even more. Just ride up it, something like that. Hit it with a little bit more momentum and just work on getting the weight back. And you'll feel that suspension compress and more pressure going into the tire. And then you can start flirting around with the clutch, what you can get away with the clutch. You can hear I was just starting to pull that clutch in towards the top there, just a little tiny bit to control my speed. We'll go a little slower now and see what we can get away with here. So it's, you know, it's a combination of low RPMs, not a whole lot of throttle, and clutch work, seeing what you can get away with. Now this time, I'll just kind of show you a little bit more RPMs, and I'll use a little bit more tension on the clutch, and you'll see I'm going about the same speed here. See, I'm giving it more revs, but I'm not going any faster. I'm controlling my speed with the clutch. The throttle is here, and I'm attenuating. It's like the clutch is just an attenuator for this power that we're building up with the throttle. It's there when I need it though. So that might be a skill to have as well, as, you know, there's all these little variations once we get to the top. Doing everything in low power, doing maybe a little bit more mid-range power while slipping the clutch because there's another ledge you have to go up again after the first ledge. All kinds of little things. I'm trying to hammer this one subject here as much as I can. I hope this stuff is useful for you guys. Let me know down in the comments if it is. And we got a few more drills to talk about though. This might be a little bit advanced, but carrying the front wheel is a really fun thing to start being able to do. So just flirting with how high you can get it. Bringing that rear tire all the way up to where it needs to go. You can see if that rear tire was like a half a foot lower or a foot lower, I would have started having to spin. It's important that if we're going up something, we got to get our rear tire all the way up to that high point where it's going to hold us there. If we don't, then we're going to fight gravity, or we're going to spin, or the bike's going to come down from underneath us. So, of course, I've showed you guys you can just do it over a simple mound of dirt. You can practice going over just a little mound of dirt, carrying the front wheel up in the air, hitting the rear brake, bringing it down. You may or may not use the rear brake on this one. I think on that one I did, just to kind of show you that I could, but you could do it without that as well. See, it's amazing what happens when you bend your legs and you can put more pressure than your actual body weight, right? Like you can squat down and go up, and that's going to give me more traction as I release the clutch here at a really slow speed. Almost a tiny little bit of spin on the rear tire. Again, we're out in the desert. This is gravelly, sandy stuff. but it's actually good for getting a feel for what your rear tire is doing. Let's see what we can get away with here. So you can hear that buildup of power, and then I let the clutch out and the body kind of goes back as the rear tire is approaching the highest point. That's the key, is letting that bike come out from underneath us to get that rear wheel all the way to its highest point. That one I spun a little bit, but I didn't give up. I waited till it grabbed, kept the weight back. And then what would happen if I didn't make it to the top? What could we do? So I got to be ready for the bike to come back down. I don't know if I want to do that with my broken leg. That's kind of like what it would be like though. Just holding ourselves there with the clutch, getting up to a certain point. This skill right here should be worked on almost before you ever go do any hard enduro stuff. Just the holding yourself on a hill with the clutch, allowing yourself to roll backwards, just the clutch. Getting up to a certain point, holding yourself there, getting off to the side, holding yourself there, pivoting the front end over without really giving it a big burst of power. Getting back on the bike while holding yourself on the hill. And then seeing if you can make it out from this position here. That worked pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So I hope this stuff was helpful for you guys. There's so much more to talk about with all this stuff. Hope these tips are helping. I'm going to try and break them down and not take for granted all the little details, but while trying just to give you one pretty much basic concept, and hopefully you guys kind of discover all these little nuances on your own, because all this stuff comes from just time and repetition of doing this stuff. You got to do it like you mean it. If you really want to get good, you really want to feel what that rear wheel's doing, you got to get out a couple times a week, even if it's just once or twice. Practice, consciously work on all this stuff. Film yourself, lots of little things. All right, you guys like this kind of content that I've been making? Please make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go follow me on Instagram. Go to my Facebook subscribers page where we can get personalized feedback, as well as online coaching if that's a thing you want. And we also have Splat Moto sweatshirts and t-shirts. Make sure you get one of those so that when you go to the races, people know you're not messing around. All right, you guys, we'll see you in the next one. Have fun.